So in this tutorial, we're going to look at timbre control within FM synthesizers, and we're going to use a couple different modulators, including envelopes and LFOs, to control the overall output of operator, and then process it fairly heavily with a bunch of Ableton's built-in effects, and the end result is going to be this bass sound, which I've got layered up with a nice dubby break. So, super complex tone and lots going on in the processing department. So there's a fair amount to look at, and let's start getting into it. So to make our bass growl, we're going to work within operator. So I'm just going to pull in an instance of operator onto my MIDI channel here, and I'm just going to rename it bass growl. I'm just going to quickly drop down into monophonic because it is going to be a bass patch. And I also want to change the algorithm, and we're going to choose a slightly more complex algorithm than this first one here. Algorithm 1 here has operator D going to C, going to B, going to A, and really what I'm going to want here is something where I get a little bit more interaction between the operators. So I'm actually going to choose this one here. In this algorithm, operator A is again going to be the overall carrier, but its timbre is going to be affected by operators B and C, and their timbres are going to be affected by operator D. So that gives us a fair amount of possibility for control. So let's just hear what that sounds like right out the gate. So not much happening. That's our initialization patch here. So let's quickly have a look at our first operator here. I'm just going to switch it over to a slightly more interesting waveform from a sine wave, and we're going to start off with saw 16 here. So we're going to start off with that, and our envelope here is a traditional on-off envelope with no attack and with a tiny bit of release, full sustain, and the decay is kind of irrelevant at this point because of the setting of the sustain and attack. So operator B, we're going to want to put at a slightly higher harmonic than the fundamental there. So I'm going to start with a coarse tuning of 3, and I'm going to bring it up a fair amount in the mix. So we're going to start with negative 17 decibels there. Let's have a listen to what this sounds like. So very different right away. You can hear the FM being generated here. I'm going to leave it at about negative 17 dB here, but I am going to actually change the waveform again from sine, and I'm going to pick one of the square waveforms. Start with square 8. So that's nice and buzzy. And let's start working with the envelope here. So, as you could hear when I was pulling that level knob up, the higher the level, the greater the amount of FM that is being introduced into the signal by the operator. So what I want to do with this bass tone overall is to have all of the operators morph back and forth with each other, introducing different nuances to the overall output. So for operator B here, even though I've picked negative 17 dB as my overall peak, I want it to take a while to reach that peak. So I'm going to introduce some attack here. And I'm just going to resound this note a couple times, and we'll play with the attack setting. Okay, I'm going to leave it there for now. Let's bring operator C up in the mix. I'm going to choose a slightly higher harmonic. Let's go for a coarse tuning of 6. I'm just going to play with my level here. Okay, that's sounding nice. Getting a bit of screech in there. And I'm going to pick a saw for this oscillator shape. We're going to pick some relatively high harmonic waveforms because we're going to be getting some good buzz here. So now, even though both operators B and C are feeding into operator A and affecting its timbre with their FM output, we can really hear the difference that having an envelope can make. You're hearing the morphing sound of operator B being introduced into the mix. So what I want to do with operator C is sort of the opposite. I'm actually going to drag its decay down, and I'm going to introduce a little bit of an attack. So we're going to get an initial spike, and then operator C is going to fade away. So now, let's go up to, again, we'll say the 6th harmonic here, and I'm going to pick a square wave here, and I'm going to bring operator D into the mix. And this is going to be affecting the timbres of both operators B and C, which are then feeding their output to operator A. So let's have a listen when I bring this up into the mix. Excellent. So that's a great sound to start with. We're going to start introducing some more modulation here. I'm going to just tweak the envelope on operator D a little bit. Let's have a listen again. And now I'm just going to try dropping my fundamental down. Let's just see how this sounds overall. Okay, I like that. Bring the tone knob up a little bit just to allow a few more highs through. Sweet. So next up, we're going to look for some modulation from the LFO. Now, the LFO has some interesting routing options here. By default, it goes to all of the operators, and that's actually not what I want. I don't want it going to any of the operators, at least not to any of their pitches. What I do want is to send it to one of their volumes. And we'll start with operator B here. And I'm just going to put this up to 100% so that we have a full output from our LFO. Let's just hear how that sounds. Okay, so now that we've got something fairly interesting going on in our tone department, let's just quickly solo this, and we're going to have a listen to the sound that we have in conjunction with our MIDI pattern here. So. Okay, so that's sounding kind of thin and woody. So what I'm going to do, just because I feel like we're up an octave here, I'm just going to chuck in a pitch plugin and roll it down an octave. Okay, that's better. So now I'm going to go back and I'm going to add some release to a couple of the operators here. And let's hear how that sounds. Okay, I like how that's sounding. Now I'm going to use the filter in this patch, but I'm going to try and use a modulator on the filter that we've already been using, and I'm going to use the LFO for that. So I'm going to go back to the LFO section and flick it on so it's actually affecting the filter. And I'm going to choose the low SVF filter, the low state variable filter. And I'm just going to start this playing, and I'm going to start with the cutoff all the way up and the resonance all the way down. And I'm just going to roll that down as the pattern plays. I'm actually just going to take operator now and throw it into an instrument rack because I want to be able to control that LFO in a fairly restricted manner. So it's going to make sense to actually attach that to a macro knob. I'm just going to rename this operator Growl. And then I'm quickly going to go and I'm going to range restrict the LFO's motion. And I feel like we had a sweet spot somewhere around about 93. So I'm going to allow it to go up to say 110 and down to 80. And that should give us a nice usable range for our LFO right here. So let's just have a quick listen to what we've got. Okay, great. So I'm going to hop to the filter section now, and I'm just going to turn on the shaper. I'm going to go for the hard shaper here, introduce a little bit of drive. Let's have a listen again. That's probably a little bit much, so I'm just going to bring it down a bit. Okay, so I'm going to leave that at 94 for now. And we're just going to close down operator for a sec and start looking at processing this just so that we have something that's super interesting to listen to. First effect I'm going to add is going to be an instance of the saturator, but instead of going for something nice and light and warm, I'm actually going to go for the digital clip center preset here. And we're going to just dial up a couple different frequency adjustments and adjustments of width until we get something that really brightens this tone up. I'm going to put an instance of the Redux on after that. I'm going to do a little bit of bit reduction on it. I'm going to go down to 8-bit. And I'm also going to group that into an audio effect rack. And name one channel Redux and create a bypass channel as well. And that's giving us some nice fuzz there. I'm also going to go and quickly throw an instance of EQ8 on after the Redux. I'm going to use that to shave out anything low. And we're getting a fair amount of clipping there now, so I'm just going to roll down the output there. And I'm also going to put a utility on the end of my channel here. Just drop it down a little bit. So next up is going to be adding in an instance of Ableton's compressor, and I'm just going to throw it into RMS mode. A little bit of a knee, bring the threshold down very slightly. I just want that to tame the output here. Okay, that's going to work for now. And next up, I'm going to do a little bit of widening here. But I'm going to do this in an interesting fashion. I'm actually going to do it after the Redux in the chain here. I'm going to put this delay into an audio effect rack. I'm going to expand it. Call it wide. Give the delay one channel here. Create a separate chain and call it the bypass chain. And under my delay settings, I'm going to bounce that up to 100% wet. Put the delay into time mode and go very, very short on my times here. Bring the feedback up a little bit. that's adding some nice wideness to my tone here. I'm actually going to put a utility on after the simple delay, do a little bit of expansion on that, and I'm going to do the opposite on the bypass channel. I'm going to just bring it in a little bit. Let's hear this again. And let's listen to what we've got so far with the beat. So I'm quickly going to take a utility and put it on after the digital clip here. Just roll it down 3 dB, just so that we're staging a little bit on the way out of the distortion going into those audio effect racks there. Let's have a quick look at our levels here. So next up, I'm going to go and hop back into my instrument rack here, and I'm going to introduce an instance of analog. And analog is just going to provide some body underneath. And I'm going to switch over to a sine wave here because all I really want from analog is just some extra warmth. I'm going to drop it down an octave and we're going to start with that. I'm going to bring the sustain up all the way and the release in all the way. And then I'm going to switch it up so it's monophonic. And let's just have a quick listen to how these two sound together right now. Okay, that's nice and nasty. So let's just quickly hop in and grab a couple instances of EQ8 here. We're just going to use that to shave out the extreme lows again with our sub, and I'm also going to shave out the highs. I'm going to, again, do everything above 500. I'm just going to collapse that, and let's just go and flip back and deal with the output of operator here. And put EQ8 in, and I'm going to cut out everything below 80. I'm just going to go back to analog here, and I'm going to put a utility on the output after the EQ8, and just to make sure that I'm getting a nice mono sub up the middle, I'm going to reduce the width all the way. And let's have a listen again. Okay, that sounded great. So I do want to do a couple more really quick little things to the output of this bass growl here. One thing I want to do is I want to add a tiny bit of space in the mix here. I'm going to do that by adding a reverb. I know that people say don't ever put a reverb on bass. That's not necessarily true. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put the reverb into an audio effect rack, and I'm going to do our typical trick of creating a secondary chain that's going to be a bypass. And I'm going to call this one verb. Now, within my reverb settings here, I want there to be a low cut, and I'm going to keep the high cut around where it is here. And that's going to just eliminate problem frequencies from the reverb that are going to interfere with everything else that's happening within our bass patch. I'm just going to quickly rename this rack reverb. I'm going to take this reverb and put it over to 100% wet. 1.2 seconds is going to be an absurdly long reverb time. And I don't need spin on the early reflections. I don't need any type of chorus. And I'm going to just reduce the size a little bit. And let's have a listen to that. Okay, so that is quite big at the moment. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to put a compressor on the output here. And I'm going to put it into sidechain mode. And I'm going to take the input from bass growl, so from the same bass line, but pre-effects, and that's going to sidechain the output of this reverb, and that's just going to duck it out of the way while the bass is sounding, and allow it to jump into the mix a little bit after the bass stops sounding. So. Okay, that's sounding a lot better. So I've just gone and added some automation within our clip here. So that is controlling macro 1, our LFO rate. And I'll just let you hear how that sounds. Let's pop back and we can actually see that envelope in action here. So that is how we can use operator to create a growly FM bass. So we have all 4 operators in action here with some pretty complex routings, and there's some pretty cool stuff going on with different modulators within operator itself. We've got the LFO controlling the filter and the volume of one of the operators. We've got that LFO rate macro mapped within an instrument rack and then automated within a clip envelope. We've got a fair amount of treatment going on in the output here, including some stereo widening, some bit reduction, some digital clipping, a couple different treatments with EQs, and a reverb along with some sidechain compression. And all that adds up to a super growly tone that works really, really well for a lot of bass music style production. So let's have a quick listen one more time to that bass growl in conjunction with the dub break here. That is our bass growl.